Good morning, everyone. This is Tryptic. It has been a very long time coming, but I'm finally getting around to doing some introduction videos for my ships and changes in Tryptic's mod. Today is going to be an overview of the Borg, as well as some basic introduction to Tryptic's mod changes. And I'm going to try to combine my descriptions between people who are brand new for Fleet Ops at all, and some of the changes that are different between my version, Tryptic's mod, and the previous version. Now, a quick background. The original game, Star Trek Armada II, came out in 2001 and looked very different than this. It had much less graphical fidelity, and it actually had some three-dimensional options, which unfortunately were just a little bit too tricky for players to understand much of the time. So fleet operations has been around for some time now. I remember I started playing Beta 2, oh wow, back in 2005 or 6, and it's come a long way since then. This is the original version, would have been version 3.27. That's the final version that the original development team released before they moved on to their next project, which they've been working on for several years now. And after a while, I came back and just decided I would learn some modding skills, and it's been a lot of fun, and I've been trying to come up with the same types of changes that they were making before, although I've been a little bit less professional about it since I don't have the ability to make, an installer. I can't modify some things because they still have the original files, and I'm only one human being, so mine's a bit more buggy, but I think I've been able to come up with some things that are pretty fun to play. So, the Borg. The Borg are a little bit unique among the races in that they have a smaller number of ships, and those ships are actually customizable. So you will begin with your assimilation matrix, and you will have a single constructor, which is this assembly node. You will have this, and you will get your resource assimilators. Unlike the other other races, you only use 2 resource assimilators per moon, and you actually build these out of the assimilation matrix, and then these will actually drop their own resource nodes. So you don't need to have a constructor to build an expansion. You can just send one of these out to a moon pair, have it drop its own node, and then immediately start harvesting, which is very nice. Now, these also have much more hit points than any of the other races' miners because there's only 2 of them, and they are much more expensive. However, in Tryptic's mod, I have lowered their defense a bit and given them this regeneration ability. This is because the other races often, their miners are very weak, however they would put a repair yard right next to their moon, and that way when they come under attack they could repair them. I wanted it to be so that the Borg player does need to pay attention. So if you attack Borg mining and you just kill them, or if you manage to attack them while they are docked, when they cannot regenerate, then you can kill them relatively easily. But if the Borg player is paying attention, he can activate regeneration on there and start to get back some hit points. Now, the core building of the Borg is the conduction matrix. The Borg actually have a 4th resource called collective connections, and these are gathered over time automatically. So when you begin, you will have a very, very slow rate of income, and you can resource 5 different node levels of increasing cost. And each one of these will increase the rate at which you gain collective connections. And the bigger your ships are, the more of them they will require. So I'm going to go through the Borg ships and then the Borg tech tree. Borg ships. The basic unit, the Scout here, it is the only Borg ship that has shielding on it. It has a single point of shielding in Tryptic's mod. This is so that if there's an enemy ship, they cannot just transport onto it without doing anything. They have to attack it at least once, and then its shields will go down, and then they'll be able to board it. This is also so that a cloaked fleet can't board it without the player ever receiving a notification it was under attack. It has a long-range attack, but all the scout attacks are pretty weak. And later on it does gain transwarp and regeneration abilities. The probe is also built straight out of the assimilation matrix. It does not require any CC and is generally not a very efficient ratio of resources to combat. The Borg ships will definitely have more efficient stats. It is a medium-range small ship, and it is the only small combat ship that the Borg have. So having some of these will help if the enemy has a torpedo-heavy fleet. You can use these to tank, and because they have the lowest defense, they will always be shot first. They have access to the intelligence report special, which will give you pings on your minimap for every single cloaked ship that is, well, every ship that is cloaked at the moment that you use it.
Relocate to grid.
The first chassis ship, now all of the Borg ships, their assembly node will build a collective uplink. This requires the conduction matrix to be built. And you will then select that, and you will select a chassis. And then once you select your chassis, you will select a number of modules.
By your command.
The Scout Cube takes only one module, so there are 4 modules available. So the first module is the interception, which will increase its offense and give it a adapted photon torpedo. The second one is regeneration, which will increase its hit points a bit, and then will also allow it to, it will passively regenerate a whole lot faster. The third one is the EM. The EM actually has a cloak detect mechanic, but that cloak detect mechanic only goes off when it is firing. And it will not go off if it fires against an ally, actually. Only when it is firing on an enemy ship, it will have a small area cloak detect around it. The last ship, which is entirely modified in Tryptic's mod, is the Transwarp Scout Cube. The Transwarp Scout Cube actually grants the transwarp ability to other small ships nearby. And I've used the animation of one of the periphery cube abilities to indicate when this is active. So you see if it flies a little bit closer to these, then they start to get it and they will have access to transwarp. So I've hotkeyed this to W. So for example, I can transwarp in, and a turn later they will all get it. And then any small ship that is near the Transwarp Scout Cube can transwarp. And it costs 75. So I've made it very inexpensive in this initial offering. I may make it more expensive later, we will see. But this short range blink will make it a whole lot easier to get in and out of trouble. And there you can see the range lines for that. Now, the next ship is the Dodecahedron. The Dodecahedron has 2 modules in it. They are Interception, Regenerate, Vinculum, which is a support module, and then they have a relay module which will allow them to turn into a turret. This here is a double interception dodecahedron. It will gain a special ability called Axial Assault Pattern. So when I have it attack, the adapted photon torpedo has some new features in Tryptic's mod. It always has a feature whereby it will deal extra damage to small ships, regular damage to medium, reduced damage to battleships, and greatly reduced damage to stations. In Tryptic's mod, version 2.5c, these bonuses have been a little bit reduced. Previously, they would deal plus 70% to a small ship, and minus 70% and then minus 90%. I have changed these values to plus 40%, minus 40%, and minus 70%, because certain races, specifically the Klingons, can only build small ships in the early game, and they had a very hard time dealing with Dodes. When you activate Axial Assault Patterns, it will fire on a second target. That second target is random and cycles, so you'll see here, it will still keep firing at its regular target faster, and then it will also fire a second shot at every enemy nearby, but one at a time. Also, I've made it so that when the dodecahedron fires on a ship, not a station, oh, that's a bad example. Every 3 shots of an adapted photon torpedo will kill 1 crew, and this will allow it to combo with assimilation strategies because you will be slowly lowering the enemy's crew. However, it's not usually going to be enough to capture the entire ship. However, the interception module also causes your torpedoes to sometimes disable subsystems, and it will mostly disable life support. So if you happen to get a life support disable, that will reduce the crew a whole lot faster for a short period. So the dual intercept dodecahedron has the fastest of these.
By your command.
This is a regeneration vinculum. So when you have a single vinculum module, you get access to the neural transceiver, which gives 300 energy to every nearby Borg vessel. This is designed to be comboed extensively with the transwarp, because after you transwarp a couple times, you're not going to have enough energy, especially like the interceptor can't even do it twice in a row. But you can then throw down a neural transceiver, and then everybody can jump again.
Instructions received.
So this is a very powerful support ability for small ships.
Instructions received.
I've increased the range and the amount of energy that it puts out in Tryptic's mod. The dual vinculum actually gains a second ability that is designed to support large ships. This is a short-range ability that is targeted on a single ship, and it will immediately give that ship 1,000 special energy. This is a whole lot better for supporting spheres and bigger ships, especially ones that regenerate. Now, these, actually we'll go into the adapters real quick. So, the adapter is a little bit of a bigger ship. It starts to get into the realm where it can't regenerate as quickly. But it's the last step before you start getting into the big Borg ships. This one here, it has a torpedo module, a regenerate module, an EM module, and an adaptation module. And let me see. This is a torpedo adaptation module, which is the one with the highest offense, and as you can see, it's a bit of a glass cannon, 41 offense to only 27 defense. Its ability is, when it targets an enemy ship, it will scan that ship, and then it will grant. Let me see if this will go up. When it attacks a ship, it will scan that ship, and then it will put a module. There we go. It'll put an extra weapon on other Borg ships nearby that will target enemies of the same race. And it should also be the same race and range profile, although it was firing at that saber as well, which I don't know if that's supposed to happen. In Tryptic's mod, though, it will fire a whole bunch of torpedoes, or it will fire it up to 8 targets, which means it's very good at dealing a little bit of suppression damage to a large enemy fleet, especially a large enemy fleet of the same type of ship. So this is a very good way to augment the damage of your ship by bringing one of these and having it support your others. If you have a EM module, if you have a single EM module, you will get the same ability as the EM Scout Cube, which is when you attack an enemy, you will passively cloak detect around you. If you have 2, however, you get a different effect, and that is you won't detect cloak normally. However, you can activate this ability that lasts 25 seconds that intensifies the EM field, and while this is active, every cloaked unit inside a medium range will be detected, and it gains a temporary shield that will disappear at the end of the duration. So this is the active cloak detect of the Borg. It allows them to detect enemies that are like when they did not know that there was an enemy there, when there was an enemy already cloaked. This will allow them to do it, while the other ones require there to be a decloaked enemy for them to shoot at.
By your command.
The final option is a dual adaptation, which simply scans twice as often for granting its adaptation ability to other ships. So it will do a lot of adaptation. Just one of these in your fleet will add a significant amount of firepower against large enemy fleets, because you're going to have a whole lot of multi-targeting torpedoes going on all these ships. Okay, now let's talk about the early tech. The conduction matrix, these were previously at the transmission matrix, but in Tryptic's mod I've moved several of them down to the conduction matrix. The high energy slicer, devastating attack, perfect logistics, and sensor relay technologies have come here. And the way the Borg technology works is none of their research costs any resources. They have collective feature slots that they then unlock. And when you unlock one of these special abilities, it often applies to many ships. So the sensor relay is available on all Borg ships, I believe. It may just be small ones, but I will look into that. So once that is unlocked, you have the sensor relay ability. And it costs 10 supplies, and it will drop a little sensor relay. These can be very useful later. In fact, there we go, let's get that. So, with your starting options for technology, you can either research some of these technologies, or you can wait for your transmission matrix. Perfect logistics will allow you to upgrade 4 of your resource collectors, and they will cause you to gain resources over time. So that's just a small passive income boost. It does allow the Borg to do a lot better on a single base, because if they get perfect logistics, upgrade these resource collectors, then they will pull more than a single. It pulls about a moon pair worth, a little bit less than a moon pair worth, for having all 4 of them upgraded. But that can still give you a significant boost, and it doesn't require you to move out over the map. The sensor relay is incredibly useful because, for obvious reasons, you can send 1 probe to every moon pair on the map, drop a little sensor relay, and it will last permanently until it's destroyed. So that will give you incredibly good map awareness. The high energy slicer is a short range attack that will go on all of these ships. It does extra damage to small ships, and it does more damage the bigger the chassis is. So the probe has a very weak one, the scout cube has a stronger one, the dodecahedron and adapter have stronger versions. Devastating attack is a medium range torpedo that only damages shields, making it very effective for capturing. And it also gets stronger depending on which chassis it's used on, but it's available in all of them. However, these ships, they're not going to have enough special energy to use a transwarp and a high energy slicer and a devastating attack, so you will have to decide what you want to use it for. You will start out with 3 slots, however there's 4 slots here worth because these 3 each cost 1 slot and this costs 2 slots, so you will not be able to get all of the starting technology until you get your transmission matrix. Now, when you get the transmission matrix, you have these options here which will cost collective connections. They will increase the attack of all of your ships, and then they will unlock more slots for you to unlock more abilities. The abilities in order are: the unit complex gives you a holding beam on all of your larger stations. So the incubation chamber, recycling, assimilation matrix, transmission matrix, conduction matrix. It will not do it for the nodes or your dodecahedron relays, but it will give you a holding. Oh, there they are. It gives you a holding beam. That holding beam does not cost energy, so you can trap a ship indefinitely until you capture it. The advanced transwarp drive is an option for the transwarp scout cube that I will go over in a minute. Data mining unlocks several new options. Well, unlocks 1 new option for your cloak detectors.
Activate all alcos.
Where did I put it?
State objective. State objective. We are one.
You know what? I'm going to come back to that. Oh, I'm sorry. I removed that in this version. Never mind. So, data mining will give a set 30% increase to the sensor range of all Borg ships. Regeneration. Regeneration gives your smaller ships an active regeneration special ability that takes away their special energy and causes them to regenerate quickly. If they have a regeneration module on them, they get the fast surge of regeneration. If they don't, they get the slow burn. So you will see this ship, when I activate regeneration, it's going to regenerate slowly. It's not quick enough to be useful in combat, but it will still allow you to return to combat very quickly after escaping. But the regeneration module allows it to regenerate extremely quickly and use up its energy. So when you have some dodecahedron supporting with special energy, this can be about the equivalent of going back and using a yard. You just retreat, you can regenerate your guys. This applies to the scout cube, the probe, the dodecahedron, and the adapter. So if you do have adapters with a regeneration module on them, then they will keep some of their effectiveness into the late game because you can regenerate them effectively. These numbers are all being tweaked because they were added in Tryptic's mod, and so I'm making regeneration more or less powerful depending on player feedback. The next ability is Nanites. Nanites is available on certain larger ships. It is an area of effect ability, and it disables subsystems on nearby enemy ships with a focus on engines. It's a very powerful area control ability that we'll be talking about in a minute. And then finally, boarding. Boarding causes you to immediately transport some troops onto an enemy ship. and it gets bigger for each chassis size. So the next ship up is the Assimilator. The Assimilator is the first of the large ships, and between the two avatars, it is quite different.
By your command.
The options are torpedo, beam, regeneration, and assimilation. If you have 2 torpedoes and a beam, you will have a very dilithium-heavy combat assimilator. However, it has an incredibly low speed and a long range, so it will be very, very difficult to retreat from combat, and it is usually not used because a slow Borg ship is very easy to outmaneuver and kill away from home. In Tryptic's mod, the Assimilator gains a large vision range and it gains a tractor beam, so if you capture an enemy ship or if one of your ships loses engines, then you can tractor it, maybe back to the safety of your own home until you can complete a refresh cycle. A refresh cycle is just an ability that every Borg ship can use. It shuts them down for 10 seconds and then it recovers all of their subsystems. But if you're in the middle of combat, you might need to keep shooting, so you can use this to tractor other ships. The combat assimilator has a very, very high offensive value, but relatively low defense, and as mentioned, it's slow.
We are one.
The assimilation module will give you a blue beam, and the blue beam gets stronger on the assimilation avatar version, so this will assimilate crew at a long range. It will assimilate 2 crewmen per second. I believe this is 2 modules, and then a regeneration module.
By your command.
Like so. And you can see it is much more focused on supply and tritanium. And then the final one is a triple assimilation, which has very high supply and tritanium costs, and its beam assimilates at a rate of 6 crew per second. The Assimilate avatar gains a plus 20 defensive value bonus to its assimilators, and the assimilator will reach its full effectiveness for assimilation with only 2 modules. It also receives the Nanite Factory ability, which causes a area of effect wave that will kill 9% crew on every vessel nearby. You need to be a little bit careful when you have 5 or 6 of these and you activate the waves all at once, because sometimes they bug out. You might have to activate them sequentially. But a large number of these, using these waves, this will allow you to assimilate later game ships, because it's percentage based. If you have a ship that has 800 crew, this is going to kill around 70 crew on each activation. And then they also have the blue beam that will assimilate 6 crew per second with only 2 modules.
Negotiation is irrelevant.
The next ship is the Sphere. The Sphere gains some advantages if you are optimized, and there are several configurations, but the main configuration that is usually used, well, we have beam, torpedo, regeneration, pacification, and prime. The regeneration module, having 1 regeneration module gives you a plus 30% regeneration rate, having 2 gives you a regeneration special, and then having a 3rd one makes that special significantly cheaper. So a triple regen torpedo sphere can recover, I can't really damage it too effectively right now, but it will recover a large amount of health, and it has quite a lot of energy, and if you have a Dodecahedron using a Vinculum special on it, it will keep on having more special energy. So these are a very tanky sphere, and they still have decent offense. The beam module has a special effect on these ships. Anytime a ship has more than 1 beam module, if it starts with a beam and adds it through a beam module, or if it has 2 beam modules, it will start to get multi-targeting. This will cause it to split its fire between several ships. The individual shots do less damage, however the overall damage of the ship goes up significantly. So if you have a single beam module, you'll fire at 2 targets, a second beam module will fire on 3, and a 4th will fire on 4. This is a triple beam 1 regen sphere, so it's receiving the plus 30% hull regeneration, and then it has 4 beams on it, like so. The beams will always fire on the closest targets, so it will consistently fire. However, if the order of ships that are next to you changes, then it will change appropriately. And if you target something, you can choose what the primary target is. So you can always target at least one beam. However, if you have an enemy who's flying around chaotically, he should be able to spread the damage out over all of his fleet. And as a result, it'll be very difficult to get kills with this ship until later in the game. And the way that the damage scales is if you have all 3 beam modules on here and it's firing on 4 targets, then the damage is double what it would have been without those. So you're firing at 4 ships, and each ship is taking 50% of what a normal damage would have been, resulting in double damage. But because it's spread out, the enemy may be able to escape, and they may be able to repair. Yeah, the final offer, the holding beam module, which in Tryptic's mod I've renamed to the pacification module, allows it to use nanites only once nanites have been researched, and at a high energy cost and a short range. However, this will allow you to throw down nanites that disable subsystems, which is very, very dangerous on an enemy fleet. Also, if there is a cloaked enemy within this radius, they will automatically lose weapon support, which will cause them to decloak. So nanites is also a guaranteed way to decloak enemies. It does cost 5 supply per casting, but it is very much worth it. The next ship is the Diamond. The Diamond is a late game support ship. Oh, sorry, the Sphere is relatively fast and it is a medium range beam ship. Also, every beam module you add will increase your resistance to beam weapons, just like every torpedo module you add will increase your resistance to torpedoes. The Diamond. The Diamond has a lot of modules, however, it only has a limit of 1 for most of them. So you will find a lot of setups will look like this or this. This is a damage diamond. It has a torpedo. Let me see. This one. It has a torpedo that deals 150 damage, is long range, and is relatively fast, and it can fire backwards. So the key value of a diamond for combat is kiting. You can get near an enemy and you can fly away from the enemy. And if the enemy is long range or medium range, well, medium or short range, then they will not be able to shoot you. You can fly backwards away from them while shooting backwards at them, dealing high damage, and you can throw down nanites behind you, which will disrupt the engines of part of their fleet. So a diamond fleet can be incredibly dangerous in combat. However, their combat stats are low enough that if they enter the fray, they will die. They will be terribly weak if you try to fight with them as a frontline unit. The answer for fighting with these ships is to get on the edge of the enemy's range and kite them all day long. You'll usually be flying away from the enemy, shooting back at them, throwing down nanites. Make sure you stay on the edge of their range, and your diamonds are incredibly hard to kill. The Diamond also has a relatively high vision range, and it has the tractor beam special. The final module, or the major support module of the Diamond, is the Diamond module itself, and this gives it a very special ability called Bring Order to Chaos.
Initiating vessel construction.
Bring Order to Chaos causes a ship to do plus 70% damage and have incredibly fast subsystem repair. This is a single target ability that is very effective if used on another diamond or a cube. The duration is what changes with the number of modules. So if you have a single module, it will last 30 seconds, 2 modules, it will last 60, and 3, it will last 90. It may be worth it just to get a damage diamond with 1 module on it so that you can use it on a cube and it will last 30 seconds. The 90-second version is very powerful, but as you can see, it leaves your diamond without very much damage. However, it will allow it. This diamond can, although its damage is low, it can cast Bring Order to Chaos and nanites all over the place. So it makes a very effective support vessel. Now, before I move on to cubes, I'm just going to spend a moment to talk about some assimilation. So the pyramid is the special unit of the Assimilate avatar. It gains massive defensive bonuses and is equivalent to a sphere in many cases.
Vessel construction complete.
The module configuration allows it to do a little bit of regeneration. It can have 2 regeneration modules which give it the special but without the reduced energy cost. And then it can have up to 4 holding beam modules, and it can have the nanite factory module. A combat pyramid will be significantly more expensive than a holding beam pyramid in Tryptic's mod.
We serve the collective.
Now, this here is a torpedo regeneration and then 1 holding beam module. The way that holding beam modules stack in Tryptic's mod is it will be 6 crew per second plus 3 crew per second for each holding beam module. So 1 holding beam module will lock the enemy in place, they cannot move, and it will transfer 9 drones per second. It will kill 9 crew per second. If you have 2 modules, it will kill 12. If you have 3, it will kill 15. And if you have all 4, it will kill 18 per second. In this way, ships like the Sphere and the Diamond that have a holding beam will actually, they will still be able to be pretty effective at assimilating, especially considering this ship has 2970 special energy, so it can lock an enemy in place. When you use holding beam on an enemy, they will stop moving, and your ships will stop firing on them. However, you can order your units to shoot at them while they're under the holding beam, so you can use it to lock down an enemy and then kill them, but you'll have to micro it. The nanite factory here is the same ability, except that pyramids have so much special energy that they can use it more times than the assimilator. The pyramid is a medium-range torpedo ship, so its damage, unless you are fighting battleships, it is difficult to do damage to the pyramid. Although a combat pyramid, it does get a very decent torpedo, 93 damage.
We serve the collective. We are the Borg. We serve the collective.
Oh, look at that. This variant is missing its tractor beam. I will fix that. The pyramid also has a tractor beam so that you can tractor any damaged ships back to your home, because the Borg do not have any default ship or repair yards, but they can build them.
We are the Borg.
Next up is the Mighty Cube, the hallmark of the Borg. Cubes come with 6 different module options. The biggest ones are torpedo modules, tactical armor, and then holding beams. They can also have a single regenerate and or a single beam. And in Tryptic's mod, I have, in previous versions, like 3.27, cubes are incredibly expensive for every variation. However, I have found that the defensive value of a cube very much determines its effectiveness. Because of the way that defense value scales in this game, you can see this is a full offense, triple torpedo, triple holding beam sphere, or cube. It has a ton of special energy, a ton of damage. However, it has only 3,300 hit points.
By your command.
This, on the other hand, is a full tactical cube with 3 regen, 3 torpedo, 1 regen, and 2 plates. It comes with 6,700 hit points. In Tryptic's mod, I have made the cost of a cube highly dependent on its defensive value. So this cube is now significantly cheaper than the tactical cube, allowing you to get something out more quickly if you want an earlier game cube, or you can go for the full tactical option. Also to note, this one will regenerate extremely fast because it has 153 system value.
Activate all alcos.
This is a damage cube. Let me see. This is beam, triple torpedo, 1 holding beam, 1 regeneration. So this is the maximum damage it can deal. And you can see it has less system value and slightly more defense. But this is an incredibly cheap, incredibly aggressive cube. If you see this as an enemy, you want to avoid it at all costs until you can go in and kill it. In the same way, if you're using this, it's a little bit like the Diamond. You're going to be running away a lot because you don't want to fight in a fair fight. If you get into a stand-up fight, your damage will be very, very high, but the enemy will be able to apply their damage to you, and they will kill you very quickly. Let's not kill our example ships. So the way that you usually want to use a cube is get into range so that you can shoot at one enemy, and then fly away and cast nanites behind you as you run. And that way, if the enemy has a fleet of 10 ships, some of them will get disabled by the nanites, and not all of them will be firing on your cube, only some of them will. Running away is a huge part of Borg gameplay because of the kiting aspect and the disabling enemies with nanites and spreading out the enemy fleet so that only part of the enemy fleet can apply their damage to you. And you may have noticed the regeneration rate on these cubes is extremely high, like I said, because of their system value. The regeneration rate on the tactical cube is its weak point. It regenerates incredibly slowly. However, its sheer chunk of hit points makes it much, much harder to kill in a fight. So it makes perfect sense that this is a significantly more expensive cube, because when the enemy fleet comes for it, remember, if a cube gets away with 10 hit points, it can still go and regenerate all the way, but if it's destroyed, it's destroyed. Just for example, here is the pricing for a tactical cube. After you've built the cube chassis, you'll have another 5,000 to pay for it, whereas if you were going for the holding beam, it would only be 1,000. And the actual numbers I'll post charts of, but you can also figure them out. And then this is actually a simulation cube. It is 3 holding beams, regeneration, and 2 tactical plates. So you can see it has huge defense and huge system value. And it does have the 15 drone holding beam. Now, a quick note about special abilities. In Tryptic's mod, every special ability has a single ship that it has a higher affinity with than others. Well, many of them do. For example, High Energy Slicer on the adapter costs a little bit more energy and has a slightly longer cooldown, but deals more damage. Devastating Attack, the torpedo that removes shields, has an increased effect on the Assimilator, because it is good at removing shields, which can then allow you to transport directly onto the target if you would like, or you can simply use it as a way to scare off large enemy ships. The cube, or the cube is aligned with the boarding special. The boarding special for all other ships, has a 10-second cooldown and usually transfers about 10 to 20 crew. However, the cube version has a 30-second cooldown and transfers 125 crew. So for any small ship with 125 crew or less, the cube will immediately capture it. Let me see. I believe that's all of the ones I've implemented for now. Okay, going back to some fun things. The Periphery Scout Cube has a very special ability.
Confirmed.
It only grants its transwarp ability to nearby small ships normally. However, once you have researched the advanced transwarp drive, it will unlock the special ability of the Transwarp Scout Cube, which lets it grant this ability to larger ships. The way that this works is you will use the special, it will lock down and be unable to move for a little while. However, it will grant the ability to large ships as well, and that will let you warp these. This works for all ships, so you can do this with the Assimilators, you can do this with pyramids, diamonds, and cubes. And considering the nature of Borg gameplay, as I explained it, your diamonds are already going to be flying away from the enemy, throwing nanites behind them. They're going to be a nightmare for the enemy to chase down and kill. And if your diamond gets down to 10% hit points, and you bring in a transwarp scout cube and just warp it away, it doesn't die, you didn't lose any resources. This could be devastatingly powerful with cubes. However, the cost of the transwarp does scale based on the size of the ship. So, you can see here, this tactical cube has 2,000 energy. Oops.
We are one. We are one.
We'll come back to that in a moment.
Instructions received.
Other aspects of Borg gameplay. Let's look at the relays. So the Dodecahedron can be built with a relay module. There are 3 different types of relay depending on the type of module that you used. If you used a intercept module, you will get this one. The offensive one, it has a additional adaptive photon torpedo that has a chance to disable engines on the target. So if the enemy comes near one of these, it has a very good chance to disable their engines and get them trapped, which makes it a very, very deadly defender. Once you start to get researches, these will apply to your relays. So the offensive one will gain high energy slicer, devastating attack, and nanites. So a late game one can actually throw down nanites as well, which will be extremely dangerous for the enemy fleet to fly near one of these. The defensive relay, built with the regeneration module, has a large cloak detect ping, an incredibly long range for sensors. This is after the data mining upgrade, which increased its sensor range by 30%, but it is still an extremely long vision range. Because I've also, in Tryptic's mod, I've given every race some form of supervision ability that will allow them to see non-cloaked ships coming in closer. It also automatically receives the neural transceiver, so it can give more special energy to your nearby ships. And with research, I believe, it will gain the regeneration ability, which lets it use its special energy to regenerate itself. So the regenerate Dodecahedron is better for area control. It will give, like I say, it gives you the vision and the cloak detect, and it is extremely hard to kill. The third one is the vinculum module, and I'm just going to show you how these deploy. Once you have them, you can deploy them into their form, and it will cost a little bit of supply to do so. While they are deploying, they are extremely weak, so if you try to proxy this during a battle, its hit points drop to a fraction of to 300 hit points while it's deploying. So if the enemy sees this happening, there is a very good chance they will snipe it. In 3.27, there's only a single relay, and there are very small differences between the relays, and once they're out, they're out. However, in Tryptic's mod, you can actually relocate them. This will put them in another vulnerable state, so they can be sniped very easily while they're relocating, and it costs a significant amount of supplies. It costs 25 supplies, which, counting the 15 it will take to deploy it again, it's a very expensive option. So redeploying your relays is not always the best option. However, it will allow you, in the later game when you have lots of supply, it will allow you to move them and then deploy them somewhere else, maybe creep them closer, have them function as portable battle stations. Now the third relay, the vinculum, missing tooltip. The vinculum relay has abilities that are based on assimilation. It passively assimilates every enemy nearby ship at a rate of long range. Every 5 seconds, it will board every enemy ship with a small number of crew. For smaller ships, this means if they stay in close proximity to this for a very long time, then they will start to go into yellow crew or even be captured. So the enemy has to be very careful of this. This ship also has this also means if an enemy ship or a friendly ship, if any ship goes to 0 crew and is derelict in the area, it will automatically get boarded by this ability, which means if you're doing boarding actions that reduce the enemy to 0, or for example the blue beam only reduces them to 0 and then doesn't capture them, this will capture them automatically. It starts out with the blue beam special, which you can activate to assimilate enemy targets. It will later upgrade, it also gains the vinculum ability, which it can use to help out a sphere, or most likely an assimilator or a pyramid, which will allow your fleet that's nearby to continue to assimilate. And once it's upgraded, it will receive the holding beam special ability, which does require special energy but will lock down the enemy. So this is, if you were running an assimilate strategy, then this may be the relay for you. Going back to the cube real quick so I can demonstrate, I'm going to activate the remodulate option. And a moment later the cube gains the ability. However, it costs it 1,000 energy to use it. it can use it any number of times, meaning this cube over here can come closer, gain the ability, and it can warp all around, but at 1,000 energy per pop, you definitely need to preserve some energy in order to use this ability, especially if you're throwing down nanites or holding beams. And I think it's likely in a late game match where the fleets are big enough to deal with cubes, you're going to have to be very careful about these support ships, specifically the Transwarp Scout Cube and Vinculum Dode, because you can use this to very quickly recover your special energy and to warp out of combat, but when the enemy sees their ships, they are going to pounce on them and kill them as fast as they possibly can. Okay, so that is the majority of the abilities that the Borg have. I've gone over nanites, boarding, and all of these, the Unicomplex. Of these 3 upgrades, upgrades 1 and 3 both increase your damage by 10%, but the second one does not. Okay, differences between the avatars. The optimized avatar gains extra special energy on their miners, so they can regenerate more with the energy that they have. They also gain a cost reduction on all of their individual buildings, or all of their chassis. So you see the cube here will cost 14, and the cube here will cost 20. It's a 30% reduction, so that makes all of the Borg ships just a little bit less expensive across the board for the optimized avatar. They also gain the Prime module, which causes the attacks, it gives very good stats, and then it also causes the attacks to drain special energy from the target. This is definitely the anti-Borg ability. You load this against an enemy sphere that has regeneration, and that they were going to use that regeneration for hit points. But if you have the Prime sphere, it will start draining energy so fast it won't be able to regenerate very easily. This is also very good at shutting down specific targets with special abilities. It's a very nasty one. The Assimilate avatar, on the other hand, gets the defensive bonus to their assimilators. They gain the Pyramid unit, and they also have the special ability that their incubation chambers will slowly assimilate nearby enemy units, just the same way that the Vinculum relay does. So they can use these in a little bit of a forward position in order to pressure the enemy, because if it's early game and there's only a few enemy small ships, they can't stay near these. They will be assimilated over time. The optimized avatar, on the other hand, has the option to upgrade their incubation chambers for a little bit extra income, for a little bit extra money, and that will give them a higher supply income. They also have access to the recycling center. The recycling center will begin taking supplies and generating resources. This is mostly useful for balancing out your resources. If you have a ton of tritanium and not much dilithium, you can use it to gain the one you're missing, or the other way around. In order to keep this thing running on both, it will produce as much as an expansion, possibly a little bit more, but it will consume as much supply as 6 incubation chambers maximized produce. So if you really want to use it as a full production thing, you will need a lot of incubation chambers. Which brings me to incubation chambers. The Borg, unlike the other races, the Borg do not buy supply. Instead, they build incubation chambers. Incubation chambers provide them supply slowly over time. This means that in the beginning, the Borg, like all other races, start out with 500 supply. And at some point, you will need to build incubation chambers before you run out of supply. If you wait until you hit 0 supply and then start building incubation chambers, you will have a very long period of time when you're not building anything at all. So it is wise to get one of these up a little bit earlier to start producing supply. However, in a team game, because once this is up, it just goes forever, the longer you have an incubation chamber, the more efficient it becomes. And in team games, it can be a good idea for the Borg player to build a whole bunch of these and then start giving supply to his teammates, just like it is for the Dominion to give supply to their teammates. Borg Mixed Tech. In Tryptic's mod, there's a new mechanic for Mixed Tech, and that is all of the constructors have a tech transfer ability that they can use on a starbase, and that will transfer that technology. Which means if you have an ally, you don't get the tech automatically. They have to fly to your base and use the ability on you. Or if you capture an enemy constructor, you have to fly it back to your base and use the special ability, and then you will have the technology permanently. While the other races get special units for mixed tech, the Borg do not. The Borg gain an economic bonus. So here, if I were to use this and just transfer it, you can see the icon lights up here green. Oh, more icons missing. The technology lights up green because the Borg now have access to that technology. The Borg have the option to build these adaptation matrices. They are only allowed one adaptation matrix for each other race, and each adaptation matrix is less expensive than a incubation chamber, generates supply like an incubation chamber, also slowly generates collective connections. So basically for each race that you capture, you can build one of these and it will replace one of your incubation chambers, and it will be cheaper and better. It also serves as a repair yard, so if you captured an enemy ship, you can tow it back. And you can see there is one for each of the races. Another addition in Tryptic's mod that I forgot to mention earlier is, although they don't have supply buys, I have made it so that every incubation chamber you build, the moment it is completed, it will give you 50 supply. This is brand new in Tryptic's mod version 2.5. And this is to make it so that if you did run out of supply completely, it isn't that brutal. If you're thinking about building incubation chambers and then decommissioning them and building them again just to get that supply boost, you can do it, but I've made it not very cost efficient. Like, you will lose a lot of money. It's probably better to just keep building new ones. And that is the majority of the Borg. Oh, right. The Borg have one final supervision ability in the game, which is based around these sensor relays. Every sensor relay is by default inactive. However, the Borg Diamond has a unique, specific passive ability. Whenever a Borg Diamond flies next to a sensor relay that belongs to you, it will automatically passively activate it. Might be a bit shorter.
Instructions received.
When the relay becomes active, it'll keep activating it over and over. When the relay becomes active, it gains a huge vision range. Not as high as the defensive relay, but still enough to give you entire strategic vision over the area. And then when the diamond moves away, it will remain in this state for 5 minutes, and then it will become passive again. These two mechanics are the Borg's late game options for gaining strategic vision over an area and getting an early warning of enemies, or even planting, since in the late game, assuming this was the enemy base, you could come outside the base, drop a relay, and then immediately it activates off of the diamond.
Proceed to center. Instructions received.
And you can gain vision of the enemy base and see what they have there. So this is a defensive and offensive application. It only costs 10 supply to use. And I'm looking forward to showing you what the other races got for their strategic vision, because every race has gotten something. So, it's been a little bit chaotic, but I've covered everything there is about the Borg faction, I believe. If I've missed anything, you guys can let me know in the comments, or I'll mention it again. This is still a work in progress. In the future, I will be doing things to modify the star bases and make them more unique for all the races, and I may do some tweaking with the technology again. So, I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope this has been educational. It is a complex game, but it's a really fun game. And yeah, let me know what you think. Hope you guys have a great day. This is Tryptic signing out.